Our work worlds are hurting because we are hurting. We can look at all the statistics and see that work stress has been on the rise for a while. But we don't have to look at the statistics. We can feel it a little closer to home. We can feel it in our bodies, a little bit of tension, perhaps a little physical pain, or evenings with some insomnia, thinking about all those to-dos. We can see it in our families, a little bit of unresolved friction, or maybe just lack of connection. We want a little more time with each other, and we just never seem to have quite enough. And we can also see it in our communities, right? Politics are a mess. Our educational systems are in deep need of support. And even our local gatherings, we seem to come together only to depart bitter, divided, and sorely lacking human connection and the basics of human goodness. We're stressed out, and we're burning out. But there's a solution to this, and work boundaries is at the core of it. I've worked with boundaries for the past 20 years, and I've worked with clients in this space for 10. And you know, there is so much in this space. But you know, my journey in this process began long before any of that. In fact, it began before I was born. In 1973, my parents decided to move to the state of Alaska. They traveled 4,000 miles to get here without jobs and without knowing a single person. My parents were risk takers. They were adventurous. And it was the same spirit that led them to start their company when I was only 2 years old. Watching my parents grow in a successful business was so life-changing. I learned hard work, how to chase my dreams and make them a reality. And I also learned my mother, who walked around in powerful work suits, 50% equal owner with my father. I didn't know a glass ceiling existed, because for me, she'd already shattered it. But there were challenges too. My parents worked crazy hours. 60 to 65 were the norm. 70 to 80 were not unheard of. And family movie night consisted of us going to the local video store. We'd get one, maybe two VHSs, and then we'd pop that in the video player, and we'd go and we'd enjoy our pizza. But invariably, by the end of the evening, my parents would fade to the background. My mother surrounded by a sea of paperwork. My father going through his to-do list, tapping off the remainder of the actions from the week. You know, as I got older, I was so excited to enter that workforce. I was ready and raring to go. And I piled that work on because I knew it would lead me to my dreams. My parents would tell me, hey, Woodrie, slow down. Smell the roses. My dad, don't work so hard, kiddo. But the challenge was I didn't know how to turn it off. In my 20s, I dealt with chronic back pain. And I remember one morning, I was leaned over the edge of my bed, and I was trying to get my pant leg over my left ankle. I got stuck. I couldn't get up. And I had to call over my husband to ask for some support. And he came over and he helped me get dressed, and then I went to work, and I worked 11 hours that day because I had a huge proposal due. And I came home, and I was exhausted. I was depleted. I was in a lot of physical pain. And in that moment, I really realized something needed to shift with how I engaged my work. This led me on a path to a lot of physical therapy, a lot of yoga to help me manage my back pain, and that eventually led me to mindfulness and some meditation, as well as a host of other mind-body disciplines that supported me at a deeply foundational level. And I took a whole lot of stress management classes, like a ton. And in this process, though, what I really learned was, you know, stress management, it's really not about stress. It's just one small component. Stress management is one small component of a much broader conversation we need to be having around work boundaries. Because at the end of the day, stress management is not going to support me if I'm doing too much already. Let's look at some quick statistics. You know, the International Labor Organization, they define excessively long work hours as 48 hours or more per week. Excessively long work hours are tied to all sorts of things like poor health outcomes as well as poor work outcomes. In the United States, our average full-time salaried employee already exceeds this by working 49 hours per week. I say this because we have to understand the situation we find ourselves in if we're going to create any lasting change. You know, I talk to people all the time, and we talk about how we're all in this race together. We always seem to be in this rat race, right? We're going faster and faster and faster. Anybody ever feel that way? Right? We're just going and going and going. So if everywhere we look, everyone's doing the same thing, we're all working at this pace, how would we ever know that there was a different way to work? We wouldn't. We couldn't. And what's more, we wouldn't dare push back against that system, right? For fear of the repercussions. But here's the deal. We are not going to solve our organization's biggest problems or our world's biggest challenges exhausted, depleted, and drained. We're going to need something stronger than that. I'd like to share the model that I utilize. Self-care plus awareness equals boundaries. Another way I like to look at this is energy plus choice equals power. Here's why it works. Number one, it can be used anywhere. It doesn't matter if I'm heads down in an Excel spreadsheet or I'm pushing close against a deadline. Likewise, I could be at home. I could be making peanut butter and jelly sandwiches. Or I could be, having laundry running in the background with the dog barking. It's all work. We need tools that can seamlessly support us in both our personal as well as our professional lives. Reason number two, it's simple. And it deepens through application. Over the course of my career, I have found that the best tools are those that are simplistic in nature, but offer massive leverage on the back end. And this is that model. Reason number three, it continuously strengthens the individual, the self, at every stage of the equation. And if we've learned anything through this pandemic, it's that resilient organizations are built through resilient individuals. I'd like to break down the model a little bit more. Let's take a look at self-care. When I first started getting into self-care, I would wait for it. I would wait until the very end of my day, 5 o'clock, 6 o'clock, 7 or 8 at night, to finally take that breath. Or Friday night, right? Friday night was always a wonderful night. I'd go out, grab a glass of wine, have some friends over, right? Have a good time, finally get that release built up all week. Always then, never now. Always then, never now. I call this process rushing to relax. Anybody familiar with that? How you gotta hustle, right? You gotta hustle in order to get that moment. What I've learned is that self-care is not some action we tack on to our to-do list. It's a mindset we choose to live. Here's a really simple exercise that you can go home and you can do tonight if you want. You can take a piece of paper, you can take a pen, make a line straight down the middle. You'll have a vertical line, and you'll have 2 columns. And on one side, you can put down self-care at home, and in the other, you can put down self-care at work. And you can identify all the different tools and practices and support strategies that you have for yourself in both of those locations. You can take this one step further, too. You can identify, how often do I do this? Do I do it once a week? Do I do it twice a week? Maybe I do it monthly, quarterly? We can start to get a really clear picture of where we need more support and how we can offer ourselves a little bit more care. If we look at the second piece, awareness is all about choice. It's all about how do I connect with myself and have strong introspection tools and also have a good, clear understanding of my external environment so I can connect with both. At its root, awareness is all about clarity and perception. When these two are strong, when self-care and awareness are working in tandem, boundaries naturally arise out of this space. Because when my energy levels are strong, and when my choice is very clear, boundaries, crystal clear. Now, sure, there's value in understanding how we set boundaries, how we communicate those, how we vocalize those externally. But the need for them is crystal clear when self-care and awareness are strong. Boundaries themselves It's really just what our authentic yes and our authentic no is, how we validate that internally and how we vocalize that externally. Those are boundaries. They're hard. They're really hard, especially in a work setting where we have things like job security, fiscal stability, job opportunities on the line. It's not an easy place to play. You know, boundary work has forced me to face fears I didn't even know I had. It's forced me to look at mindsets and belief patterns that has kept me silenced and stuck for years. And we would be remiss if we did not have an honest conversation about boundaries and privilege, because it's a lot easier for me to be up here talking about boundaries because I have a roof over my head and I have food on my plate. That's a much different conversation if I don't. Or if I'm in a marginalized group, be that based on race, gender, physical ability, or socioeconomic class. These are systemic issues, and we're going to need collective responses. And I don't have all the answers. But what I do know is that work boundaries and the opportunities they provide is massive. I've seen it, I've witnessed it firsthand. Can you imagine for a moment, what could you do with more energy? How might that change your engagement with things in your life? How about when we have more energy and we take that home with us in the evening? How would that feel for ourselves, our families, our communities? How about choice? What if you had more clarity and perspective in your day? How might that shift your decisions? How might that change business outcomes? Powerful, right? You know, I'd like to share one more statistic because I find it fascinating. In 2002, Harvard Business Review published an article called Creativity Under the Gun. And in this article, they talked about what happened when people were under time pressure for a consistent amount of time. Yale and Harvard researchers found that people who were consistently under time pressure had drops in creativity by 45%. 45%. Can you imagine what we could do with 45% more creativity? For ourselves, our work worlds, let alone our world? Creativity is the lifeblood of innovation, research and development, let alone complex problem-solving skills, decision-making. The possibilities are endless. You know, in preparation for this talk, my parents were great. They went through all their old photos. And in this process, my mom stumbled upon this letter that they had written to my great Aunt Connie and my great Uncle Bill just before they embarked on their big trip. And in this letter, they talked about why they wanted to move to Alaska. My parents chose to move to Alaska because they wanted to spend time with themselves. They wanted to spend time with their family, building and growing a family that was yet to be. They, quote, wanted to get out of the rat race. It's time we get out of the rat race. Doing so will not only help us, it'll help generations to come. The path is self-care, awareness, and boundaries. Energy, choice, power. Thank you.